Before we begin, a quick note. This story delves into themes of psychological distress, crime, and the unsettling nature of fate. Listener discretion is advised. It started with the taste of copper, not in his mouth but in the back of his mind, a metallic tang that preceded every seismic shift in his life, every moment that would irrevocably alter the course of his existence. Detective Marcus Thorne, a man whose life was built on hard facts, cold logic, and the undeniable truth of forensics, knew this taste. He'd felt it the day his partner took a bullet intended for him, the day he held his father's hand as life slipped away, and the day he first stared into the vacant eyes of a killer he'd finally cornered. But this time the copper taste was different. It wasn't a precursor to loss or triumph. It was a prelude to something far more intimate, far more terrifying. It was the taste of his own blood. He was in his apartment, a space he'd meticulously organized to mirror the precision of his mind. The scent of stale coffee hung in the air, a familiar comfort. He was staring at the intricate schematic for a cold case, a knot of unsolved disappearances that had haunted him for months. The fluorescent hum of his desk lamp was the only sound. Then it happened. Not a vision, not a dream, but a sudden violent intrusion of reality that hadn't yet occurred. He was standing lying on a cold concrete floor. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something acrid, chemical. His head throbbed, a dull, insistent ache that vibrated through his skull. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if bound by invisible chains. His eyes, though unfocused, registered the muted glow of a single bare bulb hanging precariously from a frayed wire overhead. Dust motes danced in its weak light, like tiny indifferent specters. He could feel the slick warmth spreading beneath him, a horrifying blossoming against his back. The coppery taste was overwhelming now, a suffocating presence. He tried to raise a hand, to touch the wound, to understand, but his body refused to obey. A dull ringing filled his ears, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else, even the frantic thumping of his own heart, which felt impossibly distant. Then a shadow fell over him, a tall, indistinct figure, their face obscured by the poor light and a strange, almost shimmering distortion. He felt a presence, a cold, clinical observation. No anger, no remorse, just a detached finality. A voice, muffled, distorted, spoke. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone, a low, guttural murmur, was etched into his very being. It was the voice of his undoing. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Marcus gasped, lurching forward in his desk chair, sending a stack of case files scattering across the polished wood floor. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against bone. The smell of stale coffee was back, familiar and grounding, but it did little to dispel the lingering scent of damp earth and that metallic tang. He ran a hand over his face, his skin clammy with sweat. His vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sheer, overwhelming terror that had momentarily paralyzed him. He was still in his apartment. The schematic still lay open on his desk. The fluorescent hum was still the only sound, but everything had changed. He wasn't just a detective working a cold case anymore. He was a man who had just witnessed his own murder. For a rational mind like Marcus Thorne's, this was impossible. He was a man of evidence, of tangible proof. Premonitions, visions, psychic phenomena. These were the domain of charlatans and the desperate. Yet, the experience had been so vivid, so undeniably real, that his carefully constructed world of logic threatened to shatter. He stood up, his legs feeling strangely weak, and walked to the small kitchenette, splashing cold water on his face. The reflection staring back at him in the dark window was haggard, eyes wide with a fear he hadn't felt since his rookie days. He tried to dismiss it. Stress. Too many late nights. The pressure of the unsolved disappearances. He was seeing patterns where none existed, projecting his own weariness onto a terrifying hallucination. He was a detective, not a mystic. He solved crimes, he didn't foresee them, especially not his own. He spent the next few hours trying to immerse himself in work, to drown out the memory of the cold floor and the shadowy figure. He reviewed witness statements, cross-referenced alibis, highlighted inconsistencies. But every line of text seemed to swim before his eyes, every detail of the case overshadowed by the chilling details of his vision. The bare bulb, the smell of damp earth, the muffled voice. He tried to recall the voice, to analyze it. Male or female? Young or old? Was there an accent? But it was a fog, a whisper at the edge of his memory just out of reach. Frustrating. Terrifying. The next morning, the unease hadn't dissipated. It had intensified, settling into a cold knot in his stomach. He went through the motions of his routine at the precinct, the familiar buzz of activity a strange comfort and an even stranger torment. His colleague Detective Jessica Riley, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a quick wit and an even quicker mind, noticed his distraction immediately. "Thorne, you look like you wrestled a ghost and lost," she commented, leaning against his cubicle wall, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. "Another all-nighter with the Whispering Woods case?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "Something like that, Jess. Just hitting a wall." He tried to sound casual, but the words felt like ash in his mouth. Jessica narrowed her eyes, her gaze piercing. "You're usually radiating a kind of grim determination, not existential dread. Everything all right?" He hesitated, 100 different responses flashing through his mind. "I saw myself murdered. I think I'm losing my mind," he settled on. "Just a bad dream. Kept me up." He hated lying to her, but what else could he say? She'd either think he was cracking up or trying a new bizarre interrogation tactic on her. "Well, try to get some actual sleep tonight," she advised, pushing off the wall. "Captain Miller's on the warpath about the Johnson break-in. Wants updates by end of day." The triviality of the Johnson break-in, a routine burglary, felt absurd in the face of his own impending doom. Yet he had to play the part. He had to be Marcus Thorne, the unwavering detective. The thought of going to Captain Miller, a man who valued empirical data above all else, with a story about a premonition of his own death, was laughable. He'd be on stress leave before he could finish the sentence. No, this was his burden. His secret. His investigation. That evening, instead of going home, Marcus drove. He drove aimlessly at first, then with purpose, his mind replaying the fragments of his vision. The bare bulb. The concrete floor. The smell of damp earth. He found himself drawn to the city's forgotten corners, the industrial outskirts, the abandoned warehouses that dotted the landscape like skeletal remains of a forgotten era. He knew it was a long shot, a desperate attempt to find a real-world anchor for his nightmare. But something compelled him. He drove past dozens of derelict buildings, each one a potential stage for the horror he'd witnessed. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, eerie shadows. He pulled his unmarked sedan down a narrow, unpaved road, barely more than a dirt track, leading to a cluster of old, disused factories. Weeds grew through cracks in the asphalt, and broken windows stared out like empty eyes. The air grew heavy with the scent of stagnant water and something else, something vaguely metallic like rusting machinery. He killed the engine, plunging the interior into a sudden, unsettling silence. He sat there for a moment, listening to the distant hum of the city, the chirping of crickets, and the frantic thumping of his own heart. He got out of the car, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm holstered at his hip. The setting sun cast his shadow long and distorted before him. He walked towards the largest of the buildings, its brick facade crumbling, a testament to years of neglect. A broken sign, barely legible, read, "Sterling Manufacturing EST 1962. A large, rusted metal door hung ajar, revealing a cavernous darkness within. As he approached, a faint, almost imperceptible scent reached him. It was subtle, masked by the general decay, but it was there. Damp earth. And something else, something that scraped at the edges of his memory. A chemical tang he couldn't quite place. He pushed the door open further, stepping into the vast, echoing space. The last vestiges of twilight struggled to penetrate the grime-covered windows, casting the interior in deep, shifting shadows. He pulled out his flashlight, its beam cutting a swath through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, just like in his vision. His breath hitched. The floor was concrete. Cracked, stained but unmistakably concrete. And in the center of the vast space, hanging from a single frayed wire, was a bare bulb. It was dark, unlit, but it was there. Exactly as he had seen it. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't stress. This was real. Marcus Thorne, the detective who believed only in what he could see, touch, and prove, was standing in the very place he had been murdered. And the chilling realization that slammed into him with the force of a physical blow? He was investigating his own death, and he was already too late to save himself. Michael Vance stood there, an echo in the silence of his own death, the realization a cold, hard knot in his non-existent stomach. Too late. The words reverberated in the empty chambers of his spectral mind, a cruel, undeniable truth. He was a ghost, a witness to the final brutal act of his own life, and the only detective on the case who couldn't be seen, heard, or felt. He was a ghost, and the only detective on the case who couldn't be seen, heard, or felt. His eyes, or what passed for them now, swept across the scene. The dim light of his apartment, usually a comforting sanctuary, was now a sterile, unforgiving stage. The familiar worn rug, the stack of crime novels on the coffee table, the half-finished cup of coffee on the counter, all frozen in time, bathed in the harsh, artificial glow of police floodlights. Forensics technicians, their faces grim, moved with practiced efficiency, their gloved hands meticulously cataloging every detail. Each click of a camera, each whispered instruction, was a fresh stab of unreality. This was his life, his home, now a crime scene. His crime scene. Then he saw her. Jessica Riley, his partner of 6 years, stood near the doorway, her shoulders hunched. Her usually sharp, focused gaze was distant, clouded with a grief that resonated even through his spectral form. He wanted to reach out to tell her he was right there, that he was okay, but his hand passed through the air, an impotent gesture. She looked so small, so lost. A silent scream tore through him, a sound that only he could hear, a futile protest against the injustice of it all. A moment later, Detective David Miller, a man Michael had always respected, if not always agreed with, approached Jessica. Miller was a seasoned veteran, known for his methodical approach and an almost preternatural ability to piece together the most complex puzzles. Michael had often joked that Miller could find a needle in a haystack blindfolded, using only the scent of ferrous oxide. Now that same keen mind was focused on him. Miller placed a hand on Jessica's arm, a gesture of quiet comfort. "Any leads, Jess?" he asked, his voice low, gravelly. Jessica shook her head, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Nothing yet, Dave. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. It looks clean. Too clean." Michael's spectral form bristled. Too clean. That was the phrase. He knew his apartment. He was meticulous about security. A triple locked door, reinforced windows, a silent alarm system. Someone hadn't just walked in. This wasn't a random break-in gone wrong. This was calculated, personal. He drifted closer to his own body, a morbid fascination overriding the horror. He saw the single precise bullet wound, a dark blossoming stain on his shirt. A small caliber, he noted instinctively, even in death. Not the kind of weapon a petty thief would typically carry. This was the work of someone who wanted to be quiet, precise, and leave minimal evidence. Someone who knew what they were doing. As the forensics team worked, one of them carefully lifted a small, ornate silver locket from the floor beside Michael's outstretched hand. It wasn't his. He'd never seen it before. It was old, tarnished, with a delicate engraving of intertwined initials. Found this, the technician murmured to Miller, holding it up in a clear evidence bag. Looks like it might have been dislodged during the incident. Miller took the bag, his eyes narrowing. He mused aloud. Anything in his personal effects matched these initials? Jessica, having overheard, stepped forward. His mother's name was Elizabeth, but she passed years ago and she never wore anything like this. And Michael? He wasn't the type for sentimental jewelry, not really. Michael's mind, sharp even in its disembodied state, raced. Not his mother's. Whose then? Was it the killer's? A mistake? A deliberate plant? The locket pulsed with a silent significance, a tiny beacon in the vast, confusing darkness of his new reality. He tried to follow Miller as he moved to show the locket to another officer, but a strange resistance pulled at him. He felt tethered, not to his body, but to the immediate vicinity of the crime scene. He could move within his apartment, drift through walls, observe from any angle, but the moment he tried to step outside the building, a powerful, invisible force pushed him back, like an elastic band snapping him into place. He was trapped. His investigation was confined to these four walls, to the echoes of his final moments. Frustration, cold and bitter, washed over him. How could he investigate if he couldn't follow leads, question suspects, or examine other locations? This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a cruel, elaborate torture. He watched as Jessica knelt beside his body, her face a mask of profound sorrow. She reached out, her gloved fingers hovering just above his cold hand, as if she could still feel the warmth, the pulse that was no longer there. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened to you?" Michael yearned to answer, to provide the details that were so clear to him now. He saw the faint scuff mark on the wall near the window, almost imperceptible. He knew it wasn't there before. He saw the way the heavy curtains were drawn, not completely, but just enough to block the street view from a specific angle. He remembered drawing them fully the night before, and the faint metallic tang in the air, almost masked by the cleaning agents the killer must have used, but still present to his heightened spectral senses. It was copper. Not blood, but something else. Something he couldn't quite place. He drifted to the window, the one with the subtle scuff mark. It was locked from the inside, but the latch looked tampered with. Not broken, but as if it had been forced back into place. A professional. Someone who knew how to bypass security without leaving obvious signs. And the copper smell, it was stronger here. Then, his gaze fell on a small, almost invisible indentation on the windowsill, just outside the frame. It was tiny, no bigger than a pinhead, yet it stood out to him, a silent scream in the chaos. He knew what it was. A precise, perfect circle. A suction cup mark. Someone had used a device to hold onto the window from the outside, perhaps to stabilize themselves while picking the lock, or to observe before entry. But how? He was on the 3rd floor. This killer was not only meticulous but incredibly resourceful, or had inside knowledge. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a random mugging. This wasn't even a simple hit. This was a carefully orchestrated assassination. And the locket, the initials MN, they were the only tangible link, the only piece of the killer's identity he had. He watched Miller instruct the forensics team to dust the locket for prints, but he already knew what they would find. Nothing. The killer was too careful. He sensed it, a cold certainty. As the hours dragged on, and the apartment slowly emptied of the initial wave of investigators, Michael felt a profound sense of isolation. Jessica was gone, presumably to the precinct to begin the arduous task of sifting through his case files, looking for anyone who might have wanted him dead. Miller would be coordinating the wider investigation. But Michael was still here, bound to the scene of his own demise, a silent, unseen observer. He tried to recall the moments leading up to his death. He remembered coming home, fixing dinner, settling down with a book. A normal evening. He remembered a sudden sharp pain, a flash of light, and then nothing. No struggle, no confrontation, just an instantaneous, brutal end. He had been ambushed, taken by surprise. The killer had been waiting. But where? And how did they get in without him knowing? His gaze fell upon the ventilation shaft cover in the ceiling, usually flush and unnoticed. Now he saw a faint smudge, a fingerprint of dust that didn't quite blend with the aged grime around it. It was almost imperceptible, missed by the living eyes of the forensics team, but to Michael, it suddenly glowed with significance. Someone had been up there. Someone had entered through the air ducts. An impossible feat for most, but not for someone small, agile, or with specialized tools. Someone who knew the building's blueprints. A cold dread seeped into Michael's spectral being. This wasn't just a killer. It was a ghost. A phantom leaving barely a trace. And the locket, was it a clue or a distraction? He replayed the scene in his mind, searching for any detail. The smell of copper, the suction cup mark, the ventilation shaft, and the locket, an M and an E. He knew those initials were important not because of what they represented to the killer, but because of what they might represent to him. A memory, a case, a person buried deep in his own past, now resurfacing in the most terrifying way imaginable. His investigation had begun. He was a detective with no badge, no voice, no body. Only his mind, his memories, and an unbreakable will to uncover the truth. The killer thought they had silenced him forever, but they had only given him a new purpose. And as the moon cast long, eerie shadows into his empty apartment, Michael Vance, the dead detective, began his search for answers, knowing that every clue he found, every piece of the puzzle he assembled, brought him closer to the horrifying truth of his own demise. He was hunting a ghost, and the ghost was hunting him. And the game had only just begun. The game had only just begun. Michael felt the truth of those words resonate through his spectral form. a chilling echo in the hollow space where his heart once beat. He was a ghost, a phantom investigator, and his first most crucial case was his own demise. The urgency was a physical ache, a desperate need to understand, to reclaim the fragments of a life brutally stolen. He couldn't rest, couldn't fade into the quiet oblivion that awaited other spirits. Not yet. Not until he knew. His mind, clearer now than it had been in those first disoriented hours, latched onto the most vivid, most terrifying memory: the alley. The cold, unyielding brick, the metallic tang in the air, the sudden crushing blow. He needed to go back. It was an instinct, a primal pull to the site of his last living breath. Hoping that the physical location might unlock more of the mental prison he found himself in. Navigating the city as a specter was a haunting experience in itself. He drifted through walls, through crowds of unwitting pedestrians, their lives bustling around him, oblivious to the transparent detective in their midst. The world was a vibrant, noisy tapestry he could observe but not touch, a constant reminder of his profound isolation. The sensation was akin to watching a movie of his own life, except he was an uncredited, tragic extra. He found the alley, tucked between a bustling diner and a perpetually closed antique shop. It looked nondescript, dirty, unremarkable. To a living eye, it was just another forgotten urban space, smelling faintly of stale garbage and exhaust fumes. But to Michael, it hummed with a different kind of energy, a lingering resonance of violence and despair. He hovered, his translucent hands instinctively reaching out, only to pass through the grimy brick wall. He tried to recall the exact spot, the precise angle of the attack. Nothing specific surfaced, just a sickening wave of coldness that seemed to emanate from the ground beneath him. He focused, pushing past the dread, searching for something, anything his living counterparts might have missed. He saw the faint, almost invisible outline of chalk where his body had lain. He saw the scuff marks on the ground, the discarded cigarette butt near a dumpster. He saw the faint, almost imperceptible discoloration on the alley wall, barely visible even to his spectral sight. A smear. Not blood, not anymore. Too faint. But something. He concentrated, trying to rematerialize, to touch it, to analyze it. It was impossible. He could only observe. Then a flicker. A memory sharp and sudden like a lightning strike. Not of the attack itself, but of a moment just before. A shadow. A figure, tall and broad, stepping out from behind the dumpster. Not the actual killer, he realized, but perhaps a witness or someone connected. The face remained obscured, a frustrating blank in his mind's eye. But the shadow, the posture felt familiar. Terribly familiar. He spent what felt like hours in that alley, sifting through the echoes of the past, straining against the veil that separated him from the living world. The only thing he managed to deduce was a chilling certainty. This wasn't a random act of violence. The killer had been waiting. They had known he would be there. The realization sent a fresh wave of despair through him. Someone he knew? Someone who knew his routine, his movements? The thought was a venomous serpent coiling in his spectral gut. If it wasn't a random mugging gone wrong, then it was personal. And if it was personal, the clues lay not just in the alley, but in his life. His living life. His apartment. That was the next logical step. He needed to see his space, his things. Perhaps his memories, so fragmented and elusive, would find purchase among the familiar. The journey to his old apartment felt like a pilgrimage. He remembered the layout of his building, the specific scent of the hallway on the third floor. He passed through his closed front door, a jarring experience that still hadn't lost its unsettling strangeness. Inside, his apartment was exactly as he had left it, frozen in time. A half-empty mug of coffee on the kitchen counter, a stack of mail by the door, his worn leather armchair facing the television. It was a tableau of a life interrupted, a ghost of a home. The sight was a punch to his non-existent gut. His life, his real life. He could see it, but he couldn't inhabit it. He couldn't even feel the warmth of the sun streaming through the window, or the worn texture of his favorite blanket draped over the sofa. He drifted through the rooms, a silent observer in his own sanctuary. His bedroom, meticulously neat, held a faint scent of his cologne. His desk, usually cluttered with case files and notes, was surprisingly clean, save for a single, unassuming manila folder. It lay slightly askew, as if it had been hastily put back. This caught his spectral attention. Michael was fastidious about his work. He never left a case file out unless he was actively working on it, and certainly not in such a haphazard manner. He drifted closer, trying to read the label. The words were faded, almost illegible, but he could make out Cold Case Emily Roberts. Emily Roberts. The name rang a faint, discordant bell. A missing persons case from years ago, one that had gone cold, then colder. He had been a junior detective on the original investigation, then picked it up again unofficially a few months back, driven by a nagging feeling that something crucial had been missed. He remembered late nights poring over old reports, feeling like he was on the cusp of a breakthrough. He tried to recall the details of Emily Roberts' disappearance. A young woman, early 20s, vanished without a trace from a quiet suburban neighborhood. No ransom, no body, no witnesses. Just gone. He remembered the frustration, the dead ends, the feeling that she had simply evaporated. But why would this file be out now? And why did it feel so significant? He tried to access the memories to pull the threads of that case into the present. He remembered a suspect, a man named David Hayes, who had been questioned extensively but ultimately released due to lack of evidence. A slick, charming individual who had always given Michael a bad feeling. David Hayes had an ironclad alibi, a cross-country flight for a business trip, but Michael had never truly believed it. He'd always suspected Hayes had pulled some strings or paid someone off. A jolt went through him. Had he been getting too close to something in the Emily Roberts case? Had he uncovered a new lead? A hidden truth that someone wanted to keep buried? The thought ignited a spark of hope, a direction for his investigation. He wasn't just a random victim. He was a detective silenced for doing his job. He tried to open the folder to sift through its contents, but his hands passed through it harmlessly. The frustration was immense, a scream trapped in his silent form. He needed to see inside, to read his own notes, to find the clue he had been pursuing. Then he noticed something else. Tucked beneath the folder, almost hidden, was a small, crudely drawn map. It was a sketch of a rural area, a winding dirt road, and a cluster of trees marked with a large X. No street names, no landmarks, just a rough approximation. It looked like something he might have scrawled quickly, perhaps during a phone call or a sudden revelation. He focused on the map, willing his memory to fill in the blanks. The landscape felt vaguely familiar, like a place he had driven through once or twice, but couldn't quite pinpoint. The X was unsettling. Felt like a burial site, a hidden location. Was this where Emily Roberts was? And had he been on his way to investigate it, or had he just discovered it when he was attacked? The pieces began to coalesce, forming a terrifying hypothesis. Michael had been close to solving the Emily Roberts case, perhaps even on the verge of uncovering her final resting place. And someone powerful enough to orchestrate a sophisticated cover-up for years, had decided he was too dangerous to be left alive. The feeling of being hunted, of being watched, intensified. It wasn't just the lingering malice of his killer. It felt like an active presence, a cold breath on his spectral neck. He wasn't just investigating his own murder. He was reopening a cold case that had already claimed one life, and now his own. He was poking a sleeping monster with a stick, and that monster was beginning to stir. The map, the Emily Roberts file, the feeling of the shadow in the alley. They were all connected. He had found a thread, a fragile, almost invisible string in the vast tapestry of his stolen life. But pulling it, he knew, would unravel more than just the truth about his murder. It would expose secrets someone was willing to kill to protect. And he, a ghost, was now the only one who could pull it. The game had indeed begun, and Michael was now playing for the highest stakes imaginable. A spectral pawn in a deadly game he hadn't even known he was in. He knew what he had to do next. He had to find that X. He knew what he had to do next. He had to find that X. Michael, now a specter, a whisper in the wind of the living world, floated back to his apartment. The air felt heavy, thick with the lingering scent of disinfectant and police-issue latex. The chalk outline on the floor, where his body had been, was a stark, mocking reminder of his new unlife. The apartment, once a sanctuary of warmth and shared laughter, was now a sterile tomb, meticulously catalogued by forensic teams. Yet, to Michael, unbound by physical limitations, the space felt different. He could perceive nuances, echoes, subtle distortions in the fabric of reality that the living couldn't. He searched, not with his eyes, but with an instinctual, spectral awareness. He moved through the rooms, observing. His desk, usually a chaotic landscape of case files and coffee mugs, was bare. But then a flicker. a memory not visual, but a profound feeling tied to a specific object, his old leather-bound journal. He used it for personal reflections, not official notes, but sometimes the most troubling cases bled into its pages. He remembered writing in it just hours before he died, a half-formed thought, a nagging doubt. The journal wasn't on the desk. Where was it? He floated towards the bookshelf, a familiar comfort from his living days. He saw a small, almost imperceptible displacement on one of the shelves. A book, The Maltese Falcon, slightly ajar, not quite flush with its neighbors. He knew with an inexplicable certainty that his journal typically rested behind that book, a private hiding place he'd maintained since childhood. He tried to reach for it, to pull the book out, but his spectral fingers passed through it like smoke. He couldn't touch anything. Frustration, a burning, impotent rage surged through him. He was so close, so incredibly, agonizingly close. He screamed silently, his non-voice echoing only in his own awareness. Then a thought sliced through his despair. David, his partner. David knew about the journal. He'd seen Michael writing in it. He might even know the hiding spot, or at least remember Michael having it. Michael knew he had to find David. He had to guide him somehow. He left the apartment, the spectral tether to his previous life still strong but loosening as he focused on his new purpose. He found David at the precinct, slumped over his desk, looking every bit as haggard as Michael felt. David was reviewing Michael's old case files, a mountain of paper spread before him, searching for any connection, any enemy Michael might have made. Michael watched him, a ghostly observer. David looked up, rubbed his eyes, and picked up a framed photo on his desk. A picture of Michael, David, and Jessica at a Christmas party, all laughing. A pang of regret, of longing shot through Michael. He missed them. He missed being there. David sighed, put the photo down, and then almost unconsciously, pulled open a desk drawer. Inside, among other personal effects, was a small, ornate silver key. Michael recognized it instantly. It was the key to his old safety deposit box at the bank. He hadn't thought about that box in years. Contained old mementos, some legal documents, and what else? An idea sparked. What if the X wasn't a physical mark, but a reference to something in that box? Something he'd forgotten, something he'd put away for safekeeping. He needed David to open that box. But how? David wouldn't just randomly decide to go to Michael's safety deposit box. Michael watched David continue to pore over files. He saw David pick up a particular file, one marked Cold Case, the Blackwood abductions. Michael felt a jolt. The Blackwood case. It had haunted him for years. A series of seemingly random disappearances over a decade ago. All young women, no bodies, no ransom, just gone. Michael had always felt there was a pattern, a hidden thread, but he could never find it. He'd even written about his frustrations in his journal. David started flipping through the Blackwood file, his brow furrowed. Michael tried to project his thoughts, to scream the journal, the safety deposit box. But it was futile. Then he noticed something. On David's desk, next to the Blackwood file, was a small, crumpled post-it note. David had scribbled something on it. Michael leaned in, his spectral form hovering just above the paper. The note read, "Check Michael's old apartment journal? Blackwood connection." A wave of relief so potent it almost felt physical washed over Michael. David knew about the journal. He was thinking along the same lines, but he hadn't found it yet. David pushed away from his desk, grabbing his car keys. "I'm going back to Michael's place," he mumbled to himself. "I have a feeling about that journal." Michael followed, a newfound hope propelling him. This was it. This was his chance. Back at the apartment, David moved with purpose. He went straight to the bookshelf. Michael watched, his spectral heart pounding. David scanned the spines. Then his eyes landed on the Maltese Falcon. He hesitated, reaching for it. His fingers brushed the spine. "Michael, you old dog," David muttered, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Always hiding things in plain sight." He pulled the book out. And there it was. Michael's leather-bound journal. Its pages were worn, its cover scuffed. David picked it up, cradling it gently. Michael felt a surge of triumph. He was doing it. He was guiding him. David sat down on the sofa, carefully opening the journal. He flipped through the early pages, filled with mundane personal entries. Then he reached a section where the handwriting became more frantic, the entries more focused. It was the Blackwood case. David read aloud, his voice low. October 17th. The Blackwood disappearances. It's not random. There's a link. A symbol. They're all connected to X. Michael froze. There it was again. His own words staring back at him from the past. David continued reading, his voice gaining urgency. The symbol, it's not on them, it's for them. A marker. And it's always in the same place. A public place, but one that only they would recognize. A place of significance to each victim, but also a commonality. A crossroad, a specific intersection, a landmark. I've been looking for a physical X on the victims or at the scenes, but the X is a location. A meeting point. A point of no return. David paused, looking up from the journal, his eyes wide. A location. Michael, what were you onto? Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with his spectral state. He remembered writing those words. He'd been so close to a breakthrough on the Blackwood case. He'd been looking for a physical mark, a brand, a symbol on the bodies or at the scenes. But then a late-night epiphany. The X wasn't a physical object, it was a place. A specific type of place. A crossroads. A point of intersection. A landmark that held personal meaning for each victim, but also represented a commonality, a dead end, or turning point in their lives. And then he remembered the dream. The X on his chest. It wasn't just a symbol of his death. It was a clue, a message from the killer. The killer was telling him in his death that he was now another X. Another victim whose point of no return had been reached. But what was his X? What was the location of significance for him? David continued to read from the journal, his voice a strained whisper. November 3rd. I'm getting closer. The pattern is subtle. It's not just a crossroads. It's a specific type of intersection, one that symbolizes a choice, a path taken or a path avoided, a decision point. And the killer watches them at that point. He selects them there. Michael's mind raced. A choice, path taken, a decision point. His life as a detective had been full of those. But which one was his X? David turned another page and his breath hitched. The next entry was dated the day before Michael's death. March 10th. I think I found him. The Blackwood killer. It's not who I expected. It's someone connected to the system. Someone who knows the victims, knows their vulnerabilities, knows their decision points. And he's been watching me. Feel it. The X isn't just for the victims anymore. It's for me too. He knows I'm close. He's sending a message. A warning. I've marked a location, a final X, that I believe connects everything. If anything happens to me, David, check the safety deposit box. Look for the X coordinates. They're encoded in plain sight. Don't trust anyone. David looked up from the journal, his face pale. The safety deposit box. X coordinates. Encoded in plain sight. He stood up, pacing the small living room. Michael, you were onto something huge. You found him, didn't you? And he killed you to silence you. Michael felt a surge of despair. He had found him. He had known. But he hadn't acted fast enough. He hadn't protected himself. David picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the keypad. I need to get to that safety deposit box. Now. Michael felt a glimmer of hope. David was on the right track. He was following the clues Michael had left in life. David made a quick call to the bank, explaining his urgency, pulling rank as a detective. He then grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Michael followed, a phantom shadow, his spectral presence barely a ripple in the air. They arrived at the bank, a monolithic granite building that felt strangely out of place in the bright afternoon sun. David presented his credentials, and after a tense conversation with the bank manager, was led to the vault. The vault was cold, metallic, filled with rows of anonymous boxes. David was directed to Michael's box. He inserted the silver key Michael had kept in his desk, the key Michael had seen him fidget with earlier. The lock clicked with a solemn finality. David pulled out the box. Inside, there was a small stack of papers, a faded photograph of Michael's parents, and a single unadorned USB drive. David picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his fingers. No labels, no markings, just a plain black drive. He then sifted through the papers. There was a copy of Michael's will, some old tax documents, and a letter addressed to Jessica, dated years ago, a sentimental note. Nothing about an X. Nothing about coordinates. David looked confused, then frustrated. Encoded in plain sight, he muttered, recalling Michael's journal entry. What does that even mean? He looked at the USB, then at the letter to Jessica, then back at the USB. He felt a sudden inexplicable urge to check the date on the USB. But there was no date. Michael, watching, felt a cold dread creep over him. He remembered putting the USB drive in there. He remembered thinking it was a perfect place to hide something. But what? And how was it encoded in plain sight? David pulled out his laptop, which he had brought from the car, and inserted the USB drive. A single file appeared on the screen. Coordinates.txt. David clicked on it. The file opened, revealing a long string of numbers and letters. It looked like a jumbled mess, not easily decipherable as GPS coordinates. This is encrypted, David sighed, running a hand through his hair. Michael, you brilliant, infuriating man. You encrypted it. Michael felt a wave of despair. He had encrypted it, of course, to protect the information. But now in death he couldn't decrypt it. He couldn't remember the key. He couldn't even think of the key. His spectral mind felt like a sieve when it came to specific details like that. David leaned back, rubbing his temples. Don't trust anyone, he quoted from the journal. He clearly thought someone within the system was involved. But who? Then, David's eyes fell upon the faded photograph of Michael's parents. He picked it up. On the back, in Michael's familiar handwriting, was a date. August 14, 1982. David looked at the date, then back at the encrypted file on the screen. He tried the date as a password. Nothing. He tried other significant dates: Michael's birthday, his wedding anniversary. Still nothing. Michael watched, desperate. He was so close. The answer was right there. He knew it. But his spectral mind couldn't grasp the specific combination of characters. It was like trying to recall a dream, the details slipping away the harder he tried. David picked up the letter to Jessica. It was a heartfelt message, written years ago, expressing his love and his fears about his dangerous profession. At the bottom, Michael had signed it. Your loving husband, Michael, always and forever. P.S. Remember the X? David reread the P.S. Remember the X. He looked at the encrypted file again. He looked at the photograph. He looked at the letter. He muttered, encoded in plain sight. A final X that connects everything. He noticed something peculiar about the letter. The X in the PS was slightly bolder, almost underlined, compared to the rest of the text. And then he remembered a conversation Michael had once had about a childhood game, a secret code he and his father had used. A simple substitution cipher, where the number of strokes in a letter determined its value. David's eyes widened. He looked at the PS. Remember the X. He counted the strokes. The X had 2 distinct strokes. He thought of other X's in his life. The X in exit. The X on a treasure map. The Roman numeral X, which was 10. Then he looked at the coordinates file again. He saw a sequence of numbers that seemed out of place in the jumbled mess. A series of 10s repeating. He tried a new approach. What if the X wasn't a password but a key to the encryption itself? A method? The number of X's in the entire document? Or perhaps the position of the X in a phrase? He went back to the journal. Look for the X coordinates. They're encoded in plain sight. Don't trust anyone. The phrase "don't trust anyone." It had 17 letters. And the X in "don't trust anyone" was the 10th letter if you considered the spaces as part of the count, or the 9th if not. This was too complex. He took a deep breath. Michael was a detective. He wouldn't make it impossible. He would make it clever. David's gaze fell on the photograph again. August 14, 1982. The date. What if the X referred to the cross in the date? The X in 1982 if you wrote it out? No. He looked at the number of items in the box. The papers, the photo, the USB. 3 items. He looked at the title of the file. Coordinates.txt. The X was the 9th letter. He tried to think like Michael. Michael loved old puzzles, riddles. What was the simplest X? The Roman numeral. 10. He tried to use 10 as a key, a shift cipher, a substitution. Nothing. Then, David remembered something Michael had told him once years ago about his father. His father, a mathematician, had taught him a simple code based on prime numbers and the alphabet. Each letter was assigned a prime number, and the key was a specific sequence. David went back to the journal, flipping through the pages. He found a small doodle on one of the margins. It was a sequence of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, and next to it a small X with a circle around it. The X factor, David whispered. The prime number sequence. He quickly typed the prime numbers into a decryption tool he had on his laptop, using it as a key. He aligned the sequence with the jumbled text of the coordinates.txt file. The screen flickered. The jumbled letters and numbers began to rearrange themselves. Slowly, agonizingly, a clear set of GPS coordinates emerged. Michael felt an electric jolt, stronger than anything he'd felt since his death. This was it. David stared at the coordinates, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. He recognized the area. It was an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a place notorious for its clandestine activities, a place Michael had always been suspicious of. But then he noticed something else. Below the coordinates, a single line of text appeared, written in a different font, almost like a digital signature. It read, "You found my X, Michael. Now find yours." The game continues. David gasped, recoiling from the screen. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a set of coordinates. It was a message from the killer, addressed to Michael, and now to David. The killer knew. The killer knew Michael had left clues. The killer knew they were being followed, and the killer was taunting them. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline, a phantom sensation that made his spectral form vibrate with intensity. He had been right. The X on his chest was a message, and the killer was playing a game, a deadly personal game. He looked at David, who was staring at the screen, his face a mask of fear and determination. David was now a player in this game, and Michael knew with chilling certainty that this was just the beginning. The X was found, but the hunt had only just begun, and the killer was still out there watching, waiting, playing, and now he had two targets. The stark reality of the X on the map, the implication of a second target, hung heavy in the air, a suffocating shroud around Michael and Jessica. The thrill of discovery had curdled into a cold dread. Michael felt a familiar, sickening lurch in his gut, the kind that preceded a truly heinous crime. Only this time, he was not the investigator, but the intended victim. And now Jessica, his lifeline, his partner in this impossible quest, was dragged into the crosshairs. "He knows," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with a fear Michael recognized all too well from the faces of witnesses. "He's been watching us. He knows we found it." Michael nodded slowly, his mind already racing, trying to process this new horrifying variable. The killer wasn't just playing a game with Michael's death. He was playing with Michael, using Jessica as leverage, as a means to increase the psychological torment. This wasn't merely about ending Michael's life. It was about destroying him piece by piece, emotionally, intellectually, before the final blow. "We need to go back," Michael said, his voice firm despite the tremor he felt deep inside. "My apartment. It's the only place we can properly analyze this." The drive back was tense, silent. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat, every passing car a potential tale. Michael gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his gaze constantly sweeping the rearview mirror. He was a detective, trained to observe, to anticipate, but against an enemy who knew his every move, his every thought. The advantage was terrifyingly inverted. The hunter had become the hunted, and the prey was now responsible for protecting someone else. Once inside Michael's apartment, the heavy silence of the night pressed in. The X pinned to Michael's corkboard seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a beacon for an unseen predator. Michael stared at it, his brain working furiously. "What does X mean?" Jessica asked, breaking the silence, her voice still laced with fear but tinged with a growing resolve. "Is it a location? A target? A date?" Michael ran a hand through his hair, his eyes scanning the cluttered board, a lifetime of investigation staring back at him. It's too simple for him to be a literal X marks the spot. This killer is a sadist, a showman. He's intellectual, meticulous. The X is a variable, a placeholder. It's a key, but we don't know what lock it fits. He began to pace, his mind sifting through every detail of the case, every cryptic message, every subtle nuance of the killer's psychological profile they had managed to piece together. He wants to be admired for his cleverness. He wants to prove his superiority. He's not just leaving clues, he's leaving a challenge. A puzzle only I can solve, Because only I know the full scope of my own life, my own cases. Michael stopped abruptly, his gaze fixed on a framed photograph on his desk. A faded image of him younger, standing proudly beside his mentor, Detective David Miller, a man who had taught him everything, including the art of thinking like the criminal. Miller had always said, "The devil is in the details, Michael." And sometimes the absence of a detail is the biggest detail of all. The absence, Michael murmured, a thought beginning to coalesce in his mind. The X isn't a presence, it's an absence. A missing piece. A void. He walked over to his wall of cold cases, a mosaic of forgotten tragedies. He kept them all, refusing to let any go truly cold, hoping for a future breakthrough. His fingers traced the spines of countless folders, each representing a life cut short, a mystery unsolved. He knew what I was looking for. He knew I'd find the X. But the X itself isn't the answer. It's a pointer to something else. Something I overlooked. Jessica watched him, her brow furrowed in concentration. What kind of something? Something from your past? A case? Yes, Michael said, his voice gaining urgency. But not just any case. A case where something was missing. A pattern that was incomplete. A symbol that didn't quite make sense. He pulled out a thick yellowed file, its label barely legible. Case 07-14. Emily Carter disappearance. It was a case from early in his career, a young woman who had vanished without a trace. The police had found a cryptic series of symbols scrawled on the wall of her apartment, dismissed as random graffiti by everyone but Michael. He'd called it the cipher of the raven, because of a small stylized raven etched next to the symbols. He had spent months trying to crack it, convinced it held the key but had ultimately failed. This, Michael said, opening the file and pulling out faded evidence photos. This was a series of symbols. Letters, numbers, geometric shapes. Everyone else thought it was random, a disturbed mind's ramblings. But I always felt it was a message, a code, and there was always one element that felt incomplete. He spread the photos on his coffee table, revealing a sequence of intricate, almost artistic symbols. A triangle within a circle, followed by a helix, then a series of seemingly random alphanumeric characters, and finally a blank space where a symbol should have been. A perfect empty square. See, Michael pointed to the blank space. There was always a gap, a missing piece in the sequence. I tried every combination, every known cipher, but it was like trying to complete a puzzle when you don't even know what the missing piece looks like. Jessica leaned in, her eyes scanning the bizarre symbols. And the X? The X is the placeholder, Michael said, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. It's not a location, it's a value. It's the missing element in this cipher. The killer knew I'd remember this case, that I'd obsess over it. He knew I'd kept these files. Michael began to frantically search through his old notebooks, his mind a whirlwind of forgotten theories and half-formed ideas. He pulled out a worn leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his own scrawled notes and diagrams related to the Carter case. He had even drawn the cipher out, trying to reverse engineer it. The X could be a number, a letter, or even another symbol entirely, Jessica mused, tracing the outline of the empty square in the photo. But how do we know which one? The killer is playing a game of intellect, Michael said, his eyes alight with a renewed, albeit terrifying purpose. He's not just revealing clues, he's testing me. He's forcing me to finish what I started. The X on the map, the coordinates, they must correspond to something within this cipher. A frequency, a numerical value, a position. He pulled out the map again, comparing the X coordinates to his notes on the cipher of the raven. He had always tried to assign numerical values to the symbols, based on their complexity, their position in the sequence, or their historical significance. What if, Michael said, a new thought sparking, the X isn't just a placeholder, but also a key to the method? What if the X itself dictates how to solve the cipher? He remembered a particularly obscure cryptographic theory from his police academy days, one about a self-referential cipher where a specific symbol within the message also indicated the method of decryption. It was a theoretical concept, almost never used in practice due to its extreme complexity. "This is insane," Jessica whispered, staring at the convoluted symbols and Michael's increasingly frantic scribbles. "He's making you solve his homework." "Precisely," Michael said, a grim smile touching his lips. "And I'm going to get an A." He worked through the night, fueled by coffee and an unnerving cocktail of fear and intellectual excitement. Jessica, though exhausted, stayed by his side, her fresh perspective proving invaluable. She noticed patterns Michael, blinded by years of frustration with the cipher, had overlooked. She pointed out subtle symmetries, recurring motifs Michael had dismissed as random. "Look here," Jessica said, pointing to a small, almost invisible, within one of the geometric shapes in the cipher. "And here, and here. They form a constellation." Michael squinted, then grabbed a magnifying glass. She was right. Tiny, almost imperceptible dots were present in several of the symbols, forming a familiar pattern. "Ursa Major," he breathed, recognizing the Big Dipper constellation. "And if you connect the dots," Jessica continued, tracing the pattern with her finger, "it points directly to the blank space. That's a breakthrough." The X wasn't just a missing piece. It was highlighted by an internal celestial map. Michael's mind reeled. He remembered an old, forgotten interest of Emily Carter, the missing woman. She had been an amateur astronomer. The cipher of the Raven was not just a random encoding. It was personalized, tailored to Emily's interests and now to Michael's. Using the constellation as a guide, and the X coordinates as a numerical reference point, Michael began to assign new values to the symbols. He cross-referenced them with star charts with astronomical data. It was slow, agonizing work, fraught with dead ends and false positives. Then, just as the first sliver of dawn painted the sky, a series of letters began to emerge from the jumbled mess. Not a full message, not yet, but a fragment, a tantalizing whisper. "O-W-E-L-L." Michael read aloud, his voice hoarse with fatigue and disbelief. "The Old Well." Michael froze. A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air ran down his spine. The Old Well wasn't just a phrase, it was a place. A place from his childhood. A place he had visited only once, decades ago, with his grandfather. A place he had thought no one else knew about, let alone connected to him. It was a forgotten landmark on the edge of the abandoned Peterson farm, miles outside of town, where he and his grandfather had gone fishing. The killer knew. The killer knew about the Peterson farm, about the Old Well. The killer didn't just know about his cases, he knew about Michael's life, his personal history, his forgotten memories. Suddenly the phone rang, startling both of them. It was Michael's landline, a number he rarely used, a number only a handful of people even knew. He stared at it, the shrill ring echoing in the silence of the apartment. He didn't recognize the number on the caller ID. Jessica looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't answer it." But Michael had to. He slowly reached for the receiver, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just a phone call. It was the killer, confirming his presence, his omniscience. He brought the receiver to his ear, a cold dread washing over him. A distorted, synthesized voice spoke, each syllable stretched and warped, making it sound inhuman, monstrous. "Did you find your way home, Michael? To the Old Well? You always were a clever boy. But can you find what waits for you there? Before time runs out for your little friend?" The line went dead, leaving Michael staring into the receiver, the chilling words echoing in his mind. The Old Well. It wasn't just a clue, it was a trap. And the killer wasn't just playing with Michael's life anymore. He was playing with Jessica's too. The game had just become deadly personal, and Michael knew, with a sickening certainty, that he was walking into a meticulously laid snare. The words hit Michael like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. Jessica. The killer wasn't after his life anymore. They were after his soul. A cold, furious resolve settled over him, pushing through the initial wave of terror. He wouldn't let them touch her. He couldn't. He stared at the screen, his mind racing, dissecting every pixel, every word. The message was explicit, chillingly precise. "Your wife, Jessica. She's comfortable for now. But her comfort is contingent on your obedience. Come to Dreamland, Michael. Alone. You have 1 hour from this message. Fail, and her dreams will become nightmares." Dreamland. An abandoned amusement park on the city's outskirts. A place of faded memories and urban legends. It had closed down decades ago after a tragic accident. A place where joy had curdled into sorrow. A perfect stage for a killer. Michael knew with a sickening certainty that this was a trap. A meticulously laid snare designed not just to capture him but to break him. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to call David, to mobilize the entire force, but the killer's warning echoed in his mind. Alone. Any deviation, any attempt to bring in help, and Jessica would pay the price. He couldn't risk it. Not with Jessica's life on the line. He snatched his car keys, his hand trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. His phone. He had to leave a trail, a breadcrumb for David, without directly jeopardizing Jessica. He typed a quick, cryptic message to his partner, a prearranged code they'd use for dangerous off-the-book situations. David, I'm pursuing the ghost. Location, Sector Gamma. If I don't check in by midnight, assume the worst. Sector Gamma was their internal designation for the Dreamland area. It wasn't enough to bring immediate backup, but it was enough to send David looking if he went silent. It was all he could do. The drive to Dreamland was a blur of frantic thoughts and escalating dread. The city lights faded behind him, replaced by the oppressive darkness of the deserted highway. Each mile felt like a countdown, each turn of the wheel a step closer to an unknown abyss. He pictured Jessica, her warm smile, her infectious laugh. He wouldn't let this monster take that from him. He couldn't. He pulled off the main road onto a crumbling access path, the tires crunching over loose gravel and shattered asphalt. The rusted, ornate gates of Dreamland loomed ahead, a skeletal archway against the moonless sky. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of decay and stagnant water. Twisted metal sculptures, once vibrant rides, stood silhouetted against the faint glow of distant city lights, like forgotten guardians of a haunted past. He cut the engine, plunging the area into an unnatural silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of wind through rusted structures. The hour was almost up. He grabbed his old service weapon, a cold, familiar weight in his hand, and stepped out of the car. The park was vast, overgrown, a labyrinth of decaying attractions. Where to start? Then he saw it. A single, small red LED light, blinking faintly in the darkness near the ticket booth. It wasn't part of the park's original lighting. It was a beacon, the killer's breadcrumb. Michael moved cautiously, his senses on high alert. Every creak of metal, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of ice through him. He navigated the overgrown paths, past the skeletal remains of a roller coaster, its tracks clawing at the sky, past the faded, peeling paint of what was once a carousel. The blinking red light led him deeper into the park, towards the central plaza where the main attractions converged. It stopped at the entrance to the old House of Horrors. The building was a decaying facade of grinning demons and cobweb-draped gargoyles, its once terrifying features now merely sad and dilapidated. The door hung ajar, groaning faintly in the breeze. He pushed it open, the sound echoing through the cavernous darkness within. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of mildew. He flicked on his tactical flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom, revealing twisted corridors adorned with faded, grotesque murals. He moved deeper, his footsteps muffled by years of accumulated debris. In the central chamber, a circular room with a collapsed ceiling, a single antique film projector stood on a rickety table. Its lens cast a narrow beam of light onto a tattered, dust-covered sheet hung from the ceiling. A low hum emanated from the machine. Michael approached it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't a physical trap, not yet. This was a psychological one. The projector whirred to life, and an image flickered onto the screen. It wasn't Jessica. It was a collage of old newspaper clippings, blurry photographs, and cryptic symbols. Overlaid was a distorted, synthesized voice, chillingly calm. "Welcome, Michael, to my dream, or rather your nightmare." The voice was devoid of emotion, yet dripping with malice. "You seek Jessica. Understandable. A man's weakness is often his greatest strength, wouldn't you agree? But before you can save her, you must understand. Understand what you took from me. Understand the scales that must be balanced." The images on the screen shifted. They showed snippets of cases Michael had worked on over the years. Not his greatest triumphs, but his failures. The ones that gnawed at him. The perpetrator he couldn't quite pin down. The victim he couldn't save. The innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. Then a specific image flashed. An old photograph of a young man smiling. Michael recognized him. A suspect from a complex robbery-homicide case years ago. A case that had gone cold, the killer never found. "You pride yourself on justice, Michael," the voice continued, its tone subtly shifting, a hint of deep-seated bitterness emerging. "But what about the justice denied? What about the lives you carelessly shattered in your pursuit of a hollow truth? You see the world in black and white, detective. I see the shades of gray you created. The image of the young man lingered, then dissolved into a live feed. And there she was, Jessica. She was lying on a makeshift bed, her eyes closed, seemingly asleep. She looked unharmed but unconscious. The background was unfamiliar, a bare room, concrete walls, a single flickering light bulb. She was safe for now. A wave of relief, quickly followed by a fresh surge of terror, washed over Michael. She is comfortable, the voice reiterated, for now. This little detour, Michael, was merely a test of your devotion, of your desperation. And you passed. Barely. But the real game begins now. Jessica is not here. She is elsewhere. And you have one final chance to find her. Fail, and her comfort will turn to an eternal sleep. The image of Jessica vanished, replaced by a single stark white screen with coordinates flashing across it, followed by a timestamp, 2 a.m. A new location. A new deadline. Remember, Michael, the voice concluded, now laced with a chilling finality. The scales demand balance, and the weight of your past is about to crush your future. The projector clicked off, plunging the chamber into darkness. Michael stood frozen, the coordinates burned into his mind. He had been played. This entire journey to dreamland was a cruel, elaborate distraction, designed to torment him, to watch him squirm. Jessica was still out there, her life hanging by a thread. As the last echo of the killer's voice faded, a faint metallic scrape echoed from the shadows behind him. A sound that wasn't the wind. A sound that suggested he wasn't alone in the abandoned house of horrors. Someone had been watching him. The metallic scrape was sharp, distinct, and far too close for Michael's comfort. Every nerve in his spectral form ignited, a phantom jolt of adrenaline coursing through him as he spun around. His eyes, unblinking and hyper-focused, pierced the oppressive gloom of the house of horrors, searching for the source. He expected the killer, a chilling smile, another twisted sermon. He expected the end of his current impossible existence. But what emerged from the deep shadows wasn't the killer. It was a figure smaller, more hesitant. A young woman, her silhouette outlined faintly by the distant, fractured moonlight filtering through a grimy window. She moved with a cautious grace, her head swiveling, eyes darting as if she too expected someone to appear. Michael felt a strange, cold wave wash over him that had nothing to do with the night air. He knew her. Even after years, even with the lines of worry etched around her eyes and the gauntness that hadn't been there before, he recognized her. Jessica Miller. His mind reeled back to a cold case years ago. A domestic dispute, a brutal stepfather, a young girl barely 16 caught in the crossfire. Michael had been the responding officer, the detective who handled the aftermath. He tried to help her genuinely, but the system, with all its cracks and loopholes, had failed her. The stepfather walked, Jessica vanished, and Michael had carried the low thrum of guilt ever since. Now here she was, in the very heart of the killer's twisted stage. Jessica! Michael's voice, a desperate whisper, was a sound only he could hear. He took a step forward, then another, his phantom legs moving with an urgency that defied his incorporeal state. Jessica, what are you doing here? Get out! She didn't react. Her gaze swept right through him, fixed on a section of the wall beside a dilapidated, prop-laden display of rusty tools. Her movements were precise, practiced. She reached out, her fingers pressing against a loose panel disguised by layers of peeling wallpaper and faux bloodstains. The panel gave way with a soft click, revealing a shallow, dark cavity. Michael watched, a knot of dread tightening in his chest. He tried again, reaching out a hand intending to grab her arm, to pull her away from whatever dangerous game she was playing. His fingers passed through her shoulder, a cold, hollow sensation like reaching through smoke. The stark reality of his existence slammed into him once more, a cruel reminder of his powerlessness. He was a ghost, a spectator, an invisible guardian unable to intervene. Frustration, sharp and bitter, burned through him. Jessica didn't flinch. She was focused, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She reached into the cavity, her hand disappearing for a moment, then reappearing, clutching a small, tarnished silver locket and a compact, black flash drive. Her eyes widened slightly as she withdrew them, a flicker of something unreadable, fear? Relief, crossing her face. She closed her hand around the items, gripping them tightly, almost as if they were a lifeline. Then she replaced something else into the cavity. A small folded piece of paper. Her movements were hurried, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows, betraying a profound sense of urgency and terror. She pressed the panel back into place, ensuring it was flush, blending perfectly with the decayed wall. "Jessica, wait," Michael pleaded, his voice a silent cry. He needed answers. What was she doing? Who was she meeting? What did she know? But she was already turning, her retreat as swift and silent as her arrival. She melted back into the shadows, disappearing through a broken archway that led deeper into the House of Horrors, leaving Michael alone once more, the echo of her presence the only proof she had been there at all. He stood frozen for a moment, the silence of the room pressing in, heavy and suffocating. Then, with a surge of renewed purpose, he moved towards the hidden compartment. He had to know. He had to understand. If Jessica was involved, if she was in danger, he couldn't stand by. He examined the wall where she had been, his fingers, intangible yet somehow still feeling the texture of the grime and dust, brushed against the loose panel. He pushed, he pulled, he concentrated with every ounce of his spectral will. It was agonizingly slow, a battle against the physical world that seemed to mock his existence. But then, with a faint groan of aged wood and a scraping sound that was almost identical to the one that had first alerted him, the panel shifted. He managed to pry it open, just enough to glimpse the small folded paper inside. It was nestled in the back of the shallow cavity, almost an afterthought. With painstaking effort, a combination of sheer concentration, and what felt like a localized, barely perceptible chill in the air, he managed to dislodge it. The paper fluttered to the floor, landing softly amidst the debris. Michael knelt, his spectral form hovering just above the ground. He reached for the paper, careful not to disturb it any more than necessary. It was a single sheet, torn from a small notebook folded into quarters. He unfolded it gently, his eyes scanning the hastily scrawled message. The words were stark, chilling, and written in a hand he didn't recognize. The thread unravels. Meet at the old mill. Midnight. He knows. Michael's blood ran cold, or rather, the phantom sensation of it did. The thread unravels. It was a direct echo of the killer's earlier monologue, the very phrase that had haunted him since. The killer's twisted narrative of justice, of a connected thread of corruption, now had a physical manifestation, a scheduled rendezvous. And Jessica was right in the middle of it. He looked back into the cavity. There was nothing else. Jessica had taken the locket and the flash drive, leaving only this cryptic note, perhaps as a desperate message for someone else, or perhaps as a clue for anyone who might follow. The implications were staggering. Jessica wasn't just a past victim of circumstance. She was actively involved in this unfolding nightmare. Was she working with someone? Against someone? Was she a target, or an unwilling pawn? The note, he knows, suggested the killer was aware of this meeting, perhaps even orchestrating it. It reeked of a trap. Michael stood, the crumpled note feeling impossibly heavy in his non-existent hand. The old mill, a place he knew well, a derelict structure on the outskirts of the city, long abandoned, rumored to have a history as dark as the shadows that now consumed it. It was the perfect place for a clandestine meeting, or a brutal termination. He had no time to waste. Jessica was heading into a dangerous situation, perhaps even a deadly one. He had failed her once before. He wouldn't fail her again, not if he could help it. Even as a ghost, he had a mission. He had to get to the old mill. He had to understand what the thread unravels truly meant. And somehow he had to find a way to protect Jessica, and perhaps finally catch his own killer. The game had just escalated, and Michael Sullivan, the dead detective, was about to walk straight into the killer's next move. Michael Sullivan, the dead detective, was about to walk straight into the killer's next move. He could feel it, a cold dread twisting in his spectral gut. The truth unraveled wasn't just a phrase. It was a promise, a declaration, and now, a ticking clock aimed directly at Jessica. He had to act, but how? How could a ghost protect the living from a killer who moved in the shadows? A killer who clearly knew him intimately. The answer came not as a revelation, but as a chilling escalation of the game. Jessica, back in her apartment, her face pale under the harsh glow of her laptop screen, received an anonymous package. Michael watched, helpless, as she tore open the plain brown paper. Inside, nestled in foam, was a burner phone. No sender, no return address. Just the phone. Her fingers trembled as she powered it on. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single chilling message. It was a distorted, grainy photograph of Michael's old caseboard, the one he kept in his home office, the one he'd spent countless nights staring at. But this image wasn't random. It was zoomed in, highlighting a specific file, pinned with red string and covered in his frantic notes. The Blackwood Lake incident. Below the image, stark and digital, was a countdown timer, already ticking down from exactly 1 week. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael felt a jolt of recognition, a phantom punch to his gut. Blackwood Lake. The name alone brought back a wave of frustration and a lingering sense of unease. It was a missing persons case from years ago, officially closed as an accidental drowning, but Michael had never truly believed it. A young woman, Sarah Jenkins, had vanished without a trace, and the powerful Thornton family, who owned vast tracts of land around the lake, had always seemed too eager to sweep it under the rug. He dug into it, quietly, off the books, until his own investigation had been abruptly cut short. Now this ghost from his past was resurfacing, weaponized, aimed at Jessica. She tried to call David, her editor, her voice tight with fear. He listened, his tone dismissive, chalking it up to a twisted prank by someone trying to scare her off the story. "Look, Jessica, you're getting too close to something big. People don't like that. Just ignore it. Focus on what you know." But Jessica knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was no prank. This was a message, a threat, a twisted invitation to a game she hadn't asked to play. She felt utterly isolated, trapped in a web spun by an unseen adversary. Michael watched her, his heart aching with a pain that shouldn't be possible for a dead man. He knew the killer was linking Jessica to Blackwood Lake, making her a target because she was digging into his past, which led directly to their past. The countdown was a deadline, a promise of a public spectacle, the truth unraveled for all to see. He had to protect her, but how? He couldn't speak, couldn't touch, couldn't leave a note. His existence was a secret, his influence limited to the subtle nudges only he could perceive. Then a flicker of an idea. A long shot, but his only shot. He remembered Emily Chan, a brilliant, eccentric tech wizard he'd worked with on a few cases. She owed him a favor, a big one, from a time he'd helped her out of a jam involving some very sensitive data. Emily was sharp, intuitive, and most importantly, she understood the digital underworld better than anyone. He couldn't contact her directly, but he had an old dead drop, a forgotten corner of the internet, a nearly invisible digital mailbox they'd used for highly sensitive intel. It was a long shot that she'd even remember it, let alone check it, but he had to try. He focused, pushing against the ethereal barriers of his existence, willing the digital world to bend to his will. It was like trying to push water uphill with his mind, but a faint, almost imperceptible current shifted. He managed to leave a cryptic message, a string of code and a single phrase. Blackwood Lake. Digital forensics. Jessica. Now. He knew it was a gamble. Emily was particular. If she didn't get it, or if she dismissed it as a glitch, Jessica would be on her own. He could only hope his message, imbued with his desperate intent, would somehow reach her. Meanwhile, the killer continued their insidious work. Within days, subtle news articles began to surface, first in obscure online forums, then picked up by local news blogs, linking Jessica's current investigation into Michael's murder to unresolved mysteries in the city's past. The Blackwood Lake incident, once a forgotten footnote, was suddenly being exhumed, framed as a scandal, a cover-up, a blight on the city's conscience. It was a smear campaign against Jessica, subtly undermining her credibility, but also a brilliant, twisted way to draw public attention to the very thing the killer wanted to expose. Jessica, feeling the walls close in, began to dig into Blackwood Lake herself. The burner phone, its countdown relentlessly ticking, was a constant, terrifying reminder. She found fragmented police reports, whispers of a powerful family's influence, and the name of the missing woman, Sarah Jenkins. She cross-referenced names, timelines, and locations. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Something deeply wrong had happened at Blackwood Lake, and Michael had been close to uncovering it. Michael watched her, his spectral form pacing the confines of her apartment. He saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes, the growing fear mixed with a fierce determination. She was uncovering their version of the truth, the one the killer wanted exposed. He realized the killer wanted Jessica to uncover their version of the truth about Blackwood Lake, and then expose it publicly at the countdown's end. This was the truth unraveled. And Michael's murder? It wasn't just to silence him. It was to set this entire elaborate, chilling stage, to kickstart this grand performance of justice. Jessica, alone in her apartment, stared at the burner phone. The countdown now showed just 6 days, 23 hours, and 58 minutes. She zoomed in on the distorted image of Michael's old case board, the one the killer had sent. Her eyes scanned every pixel, every shadow. And then she saw it, so subtle it was almost invisible. A tiny, stylized watermark, barely a pixelated smudge on the bottom right corner of the image. A small, elegant T. Michael, watching over her shoulder, felt a surge of cold fury. The T. He knew what it meant. Thornton. The powerful family whose land bordered Blackwood Lake. The family that had always seemed too eager to close the case. He'd suspected them, but never had enough proof. Now the killer was using that connection, that hidden truth, as their weapon. He'd put the pieces together. The killer wasn't just seeking justice for Michael, or for Sarah Jenkins. They were orchestrating a grand public spectacle of truth, a devastating expose, and Jessica was their unwitting star. He had to stop it. He had to stop them. The game was no longer about solving his murder. It was about saving Jessica, and exposing the true architect of this insidious plan before the countdown reached 0. Michael felt the cold dread solidify into a burning resolve. The game was unveiled. He was a pawn, Jessica a helpless piece, and a puppet master pulled the strings from a vantage point he couldn't yet see. The simulation, once his reality, was now a cage, and he had to dismantle it from the inside. The countdown, displayed somewhere in the periphery of his fabricated world, was no longer a timer to his death, but to Jessica's. He moved with a new purpose, his previous investigations now recontextualized. Every clue was a misdirection, every witness an algorithm. He needed to find the real cracks, the system's vulnerabilities. He returned to the precinct, not to review files, but to probe the environment. He scanned the familiar faces of his AI colleagues, searching for a flicker, a stutter, a deviation from their programmed loops. Nothing. The simulation was flawless, sickeningly so. He went back to the crime scene, his apartment. He didn't look for forced entry or ballistics. He looked for anomalies. He ran his hands over the pristine surfaces, feeling for a seam that wasn't supposed to be there, a texture that felt wrong. He checked behind every picture, under every floorboard, not for a hidden message from his killer, but for a hidden message from the simulation itself. Suddenly, a faint shimmer caught his eye, barely perceptible, on the underside of his desk. It wasn't a reflection. It was a distortion like heat haze, but localized to a single point. He pressed his finger against it. For a split second, the air around his finger rippled, and he felt a faint hum, a vibration that resonated not through the simulated wood, but through his very being. It was a digital artifact, a momentary tear in the fabric of his false reality. He focused, pushing against the ripple. It resisted, then yielded. A small, almost invisible panel recessed into the desk material became visible. It wasn't a drawer, not a compartment. It was a control interface disguised perfectly. His heart hammered. This was it. This was an access point. He touched the panel. A series of cryptic symbols, reminiscent of old programming language, flickered across its surface. He didn't understand them, but he understood the intent. This was a backdoor, a diagnostic port, perhaps left intentionally by the architect, a final test of his cognitive abilities. Or perhaps a mistake. He tried various combinations, drawing on every piece of technical knowledge he'd ever acquired, every obscure hacker movie he'd ever seen. He typed in his badge number, his birthday, Jessica's birthday. Nothing. The symbols remained static, demanding a specific key. Then a thought struck him. What was the one thing that defined this simulation? His murder. The date, the time, the specific details. He entered the exact simulated time of his death, followed by the case number assigned to his murder. The symbols vanished, replaced by a single word. Access granted. A new interface appeared, a menu of options that made his blood run cold. Simulation parameters, subject monitoring, event logs, and chillingly, subject, Jessica Reed status, active. He clicked on subject monitoring. A live feed of Jessica's movements appeared. She was in her apartment, looking distressed, pacing. The countdown clock was visible in the corner of her feed, now showing less than 48 hours. He felt a surge of panic. He had to warn her. He had to get her out. He tried to find a communication option, but there was none for his own subject's status. He was still within the simulation, merely given a glimpse behind the curtain. He scrolled through event logs. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming. He filtered by anomalies and system interventions. Pages of data scrolled by, detailing every time he had deviated from the architect's expected path, every glitch he had noticed. They knew. They were always watching. Then he saw it. A recurring IP address associated with external access and parameter adjustments. He cross-referenced it with the simulation's internal network logs. It traced back to a private server, one he recognized from his real life. A server owned by Dr. Elias Vance. Vance, his former mentor. The brilliant, enigmatic psychologist who had advised him on some of his toughest cases. The man who preached about the fragility of the mind and the power of suggestion. He had dismissed Vance as a mere AI construct in this world, a helpful but ultimately irrelevant character. But Vance was real. And he was the architect. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Vance's obsession with the human psyche, his theories on control and manipulation, his fascination with Michael's own deductive mind. This wasn't just an experiment. It was Vance's magnum opus, a twisted demonstration of his ultimate control. He wasn't trying to solve Michael's murder. He was trying to break Michael, to prove his theories, to show that even the sharpest mind could be manipulated into solving a crime that never happened. All while a loved one hung in the balance. The countdown wasn't for Jessica's death, not exactly. It was for the reveal. For Vance to step out from behind the curtain and present his masterpiece to Michael, perhaps even to others watching this sick spectacle. And Jessica? She was the leverage, the ultimate emotional trigger to ensure Michael played his part perfectly. Michael had to communicate with Jessica. He couldn't use the interface directly, but he could manipulate the environment. He scrolled through simulation parameters. He found options for NPC behavior, environmental triggers, information injection. It was risky. Any overt manipulation would be detected immediately by Vance. He had to be subtle. He had to plant a seed, a message that only Jessica would understand, hidden within the simulation's own logic. He remembered a small, obscure detail from their real life together. A specific phrase they used. A code word for when one of them was in trouble but couldn't speak openly. It was blue heron, a reference to a particularly difficult cold case they'd solved where a blue heron feather was the only clue. He carefully navigated the interface, searching for a way to introduce this phrase into Jessica's simulated environment. He couldn't just have an AI say it. It had to be organic, something she would encounter naturally. He found environmental triggers visual. He located a specific, infrequently used park in the simulation, a place where Jessica sometimes went for walks. He searched for object placement. With trembling fingers he typed, blue heron feather. He assigned it to a specific bench in the park, a bench she often sat on in their real simulated life. He set the trigger for her next visit. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all he had. As he confirmed the placement, the interface flickered violently. A warning message flashed across the screen. Unauthorized parameter modification detected. Architect alerted. Vance knew. Michael had pushed too far too fast. The jig was up. Suddenly, the simulated apartment around him began to distort. Walls rippled. Furniture dissolved into pixels. The air crackled with a low hum, growing louder, more insistent. The entire simulation was destabilizing, reacting to his unauthorized access. A deep, resonant voice, familiar and chillingly calm, echoed through the collapsing environment. It wasn't coming from the apartment but from everywhere at once, directly into his mind. Well, detective. It seems you finally cracked the code. Impressive, truly. I always knew you were tenacious. But I must confess, I'm a little disappointed. You were supposed to solve my murder, Michael, not dismantle my masterpiece. It was Vance. His voice, clear and unmodulated, filled the void. You've accelerated the timeline, my friend. A shame. I had such an elegant conclusion planned. But no matter. The game must still conclude. And Jessica, she awaits her fate. The world around Michael dissolved into a blinding white light, the hum rising to an unbearable pitch. He felt a sickening lurch, a sensation of being torn from his mooring. He was being pulled out, forcibly ejected from the simulation. He clung to one thought, blue heron. He hoped Jessica would find it. He hoped she would understand. The light consumed him, and then a sudden jarring silence. He was no longer in the apartment, no longer in the simulated world. He was somewhere else, and the countdown was still ticking. Only now it felt terrifyingly real. The light consumed him, and then a sudden jarring silence. He was no longer in the apartment, no longer in the simulated world. He was somewhere else, and the countdown was still ticking. Only now it felt terrifyingly real. His senses screamed, then flatlined. Not a blinding light, but an overwhelming nothing. No sound, no sight, no touch. Just a profound, crushing void. He tried to move, to speak, but found himself utterly paralyzed, suspended in an abyss of non-existence. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his consciousness. Was this death? Had the simulation been a prelude to this? Then a flicker, a faint hum like distant machinery, a pressure gentle but firm against his temples, a faint, clinical scent, almost antiseptic. His eyes, though still closed, registered a dull, diffused luminescence behind his eyelids. He wasn't dead. He was in a room, and the paralysis was slowly, agonizingly receding. He gasped, a dry, ragged sound, as his lungs suddenly remembered their purpose. His eyes snapped open, struggling to focus against the lingering haze. He was lying on a narrow, uncomfortable cot. The room was stark, white, and disturbingly sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a harsh, shadowless glow. Wires, thick and numerous, snaked from his head, chest, and limbs, disappearing into a complex console beside the cot. A screen on the console displayed a cascade of data: heart rate, brain activity, oxygen levels. And right there, flashing in angry red, was the countdown. 00:01:47. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the impending doom. He tried to sit up, but a jolt of pain shot through his muscles. He was weak, disoriented, as if he'd been asleep for a very, very long time. A voice, calm and clinical, broke the silence. "Detective Michael Hayes. Welcome back." He flinched, turning his head sharply. A man stood by the console, observing him with an unnerving lack of emotion. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a white lab coat, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to dissect Michael with a single glance. Michael recognized him immediately. It was Dr. Elias Thorne, the psychiatrist who had been overseeing his therapy sessions, the man who had always been just a little too detached, a little too knowing. "Thorne," Michael croaked, his voice raw. What is this? Where am I?" Thorne offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "You are in the facility, Michael. The place where you've been for the last, well, for quite some time now." He gestured vaguely around the sterile room. "And the simulation you just exited? That was your final test." Michael stared, his mind reeling, trying to process Thorne's words. "Test? What test? The murder? Jessica, the countdown? None of it was real." Thorne walked closer, picking up a clipboard from the console. "Oh, the murder was very real, Michael. Just not in the way you experienced it. And the countdown is extremely real. In fact, it's almost over." He tapped his pen against the clipboard, his gaze fixed on Michael's face. "Tell me, Michael, what did you conclude?" "Conclude." Michael pushed himself up, ignoring the throbbing pain. "I concluded that I was framed, that someone wanted me out of the way for investigating something big. I concluded that Jessica was trying to help me, that she was covering for someone, or protecting someone, maybe even herself." The memory of her last desperate plea, her eyes wide with unsaid truths, flashed in his mind. "I concluded that the real killer was someone connected to the department, someone powerful enough to manipulate evidence, to silence witnesses. Someone like David, or maybe even you." He looked at Thorne, suspicion hardening his gaze. "You were always there, always watching, always pushing me, guiding me." Thorne nodded slowly, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. "Interesting. You were close, Michael. Very, very close in some aspects. But you missed the crucial piece. The why." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. The countdown on the screen glared. 00:01:12. "The why?" Michael repeated, his voice laced with desperation. "Why was I put through this? Why frame me for my own murder in a simulated reality?" "Because you were murdered, Michael," Thorne stated. his voice devoid of emotion. And you weren't framed. You were the victim. The simulation wasn't about solving a fictional crime. It was about remembering your own. The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a chilling realization that everything he thought he knew was a carefully constructed lie. Remembering, he whispered. What are you talking about? Thorne gestured to the console. Your brain, Michael, was severely damaged. A specific section, responsible for forming new memories and retrieving certain traumatic ones, was compromised. You were found in critical condition, barely alive, with a bullet wound to the head. You were pronounced dead at the scene, but miraculously you clung to life. We brought you here to this facility, where we specialize in neurological reconstruction. A bullet wound? Michael's hand flew to his temple, feeling a faint, raised scar he'd never noticed before, hidden beneath his hair. I don't remember any of that. Precisely, Thorne said. That's why we created the simulation. A highly advanced neurocognitive therapy designed to stimulate your brain, to recreate the circumstances of your death in a controlled environment, and allow your subconscious to reprocess the trauma, to reconstruct the missing pieces of your memory. We needed you to investigate your own murder, because you were the only one who could truly solve it. Michael's mind reeled. The headaches, the strange sense of déjà vu, the vividness of the dream. It all started to make a terrifying kind of sense. He had been reliving his own final moments, his own investigation from the perspective of a ghost. So the countdown. Michael looked at the screen, panic flaring anew. 00:00:58. What happens when it hits 0? Thorne's expression finally softened, a flicker of genuine concern crossing his face. When it hits 0, Michael, the neural link fully disengages. The process will be complete, and your brain, if successful, will have fully integrated the restored memories. You will remember everything. He paused, his gaze intense. But there's a risk, a significant one. The reintegration could be destabilizing. Or, if the process wasn't complete, if you didn't truly understand the why, you might not fully recover. You might remain lost. Lost? Michael felt a tremor run through him. You mean, permanently brain damaged? Thorne didn't answer directly. Instead he said, tell me, Michael. In your simulated reality, who was the killer? Michael closed his eyes, the faces flashing through his mind. David, the corrupt captain, Jessica, the enigmatic partner, even himself, the detective driven by a relentless pursuit of truth. He remembered the apartment, the frantic search, the final confrontation. He remembered the bullet, the blinding flash. He remembered the feeling of betrayal, of being utterly alone in that final moment. It was David, Michael said, his voice firm, a new clarity emerging from the fog of confusion. He was the one who pulled the trigger. He was the one who orchestrated the frame-up, the one who tried to silence me. Jessica, she was trying to expose him. She was trying to protect me, to give me the evidence I needed, even if it meant putting herself at risk. And the why? Thorne pressed, his eyes never leaving Michael's. Why would Captain David Miller murder one of his best detectives? Michael took a deep breath, the pieces of the puzzle, now untangled from the simulation's distractions, clicking into place with terrifying speed. The case, the one I was working on, the one David kept trying to shut down. The missing evidence, the erased files, the dead-end leads. It wasn't just about corruption within the department, was it? It was bigger. Much bigger. David wasn't just covering for himself. He was covering for an entire network. A criminal enterprise, operating right under the department's nose. And I was getting too close. Jessica knew it. She tried to warn me. She left clues, subtle hints, things that only I would pick up on. She was trying to lead me to the truth, to the real evidence David was trying to bury. 00:00:25. The red numbers pulsed, growing brighter, more insistent. She was giving you the means to expose him, Thorne confirmed, a hint of approval in his voice. She was a brave woman, Michael, and she paid the ultimate price. A wave of grief, raw and profound, washed over Michael. Not for the simulated Jessica, but for the real one. The one who truly existed, the one who had truly sacrificed everything. He remembered her face from the simulation, her eyes pleading, her lips forming words he couldn't quite hear. Now he understood. She wasn't just saying, I'm sorry. She was saying, find the truth. Expose him. So David murdered me. Michael said, the reality solidifying. And then he covered it up, made it look like I'd gone rogue, that I was the corrupt one. And then he tried to kill Jessica too, to silence her completely. Thorne nodded. He failed to kill Jessica. She survived, critically wounded, but she managed to provide us with the initial fragments of information, enough to bring you here to save your life and to begin this process. She's been waiting, Michael. Waiting for you to remember. Waiting for you to finish what you started. 00:00:10. The room began to hum louder, the lights flickering. Michael felt a strange tingling sensation spread through his body, a powerful current of energy. She's alive, Michael gasped, a surge of hope mixing with the terror. Jessica is alive? She is, Thorne confirmed, a genuine smile now gracing his lips. And she's ready to testify, ready to bring down the network. But you, Michael, you are the key. You have the full picture now. You have the evidence, the memories, the truth. 00:00:05. The humming intensified, the wires connected to Michael's head beginning to glow faintly. His vision blurred, the sterile room twisting and warping around him. What do I do? Michael yelled, his voice strained against the rising cacophony of the machinery. What do I do now? Thorne stepped back, his expression resolute. You remember, Michael. You remember everything. And then you wake up. You finish the job. You bring David and his network to justice. For yourself. For Jessica. For all the victims. 00:00:03. The tingling turned into an electric surge, coursing through every nerve ending. His head felt like it was splitting open, 1,000 fragmented memories rushing to the forefront of his mind, intertwining, coalescing, forming a complete, horrifying narrative. 00:00:02. He saw it all. The shadowy figures, the whispered conversations, the illicit deals, the moment David's eyes hardened, the glint of the gun, the searing pain, the fall, the darkness. 00:00:01. The face of David, twisted in a sneer, standing over him, gun still smoking. And the face of Jessica, pale and terrified, hiding just out of sight, witnessing it all. 00:00:00. A blinding flash. A deafening crack. And then a profound, absolute silence. The world shattered. Or perhaps Michael did. A rush of cold, then an empty, echoing void. No pain, no fear, just nothingness. He was adrift, untethered, a single thought flickering in the vast dark. This is it. But the void didn't last. A shimmering began, a distortion like looking through heat haze. He felt a profound pull, a sickening lurch, and then he was back. But not back. Not in the way he understood. He was above it all, a silent observer. He looked down. There, on the cold concrete of the abandoned warehouse, lay a body. His body. The familiar trench coat, the rumpled shirt, the pooling crimson staining the ground beneath him. His eyes, wide and vacant, stared up at the corrugated iron ceiling. A single dark entry wound marred his chest. This was it. The truth. He was dead. And he had been dead all along. Every interaction, every whisper, every fleeting touch. A desperate, dying echo of his own consciousness, replaying fragments, searching for answers. He was a ghost, a memory, a final desperate plea for justice, caught between worlds until the truth found its light. He turned his gaze. David stood over the body, breathing heavily, the gun still clutched in his trembling hand. The bravado had vanished, replaced by a raw, desperate terror. His face, once twisted in a sneer, was now contorted with a profound, gut-wrenching anguish. And then Michael saw her. Jessica, peeking from behind a stack of crates, her face a mask of horror, tears streaming silent paths through the grime on her cheeks. Her hands were clamped over her mouth, stifling a scream, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. David spun around, his eyes darting to the shadows, then locking onto Jessica. Jessica? Are you okay? His voice was a ragged whisper, barely audible above his own ragged breathing. The gun slipped from his fingers and clattered to the concrete. She stumbled out, her legs threatening to give way, her gaze fixed on Michael's lifeless form. Okay, David, what have you done? You shot him. You shot Michael. Her voice was a choked sob, laced with disbelief and horror. David's face crumpled. He sank to his knees, not beside Michael, but a few feet away, as if unable to approach the horror he had wrought. I had to, Jess. You don't understand. He was going to expose everything. Not just the Sterling case, but everything. He gestured wildly around the warehouse, his hands trembling. This was supposed to be a warning. Just a warning. I never meant, but he pushed. He always pushed, didn't he? Always digging, always looking for the truth, no matter the cost. Michael watched, a new kind of coldness seeping into his ethereal form, colder than death itself. The Sterling case. Richard Sterling. The crooked developer he'd almost nailed years ago, the one who'd mysteriously walked free. The case that had always gnawed at him, a loose thread in the tapestry of his career. He'd thought he was revisiting a cold trail, an old injustice. He hadn't realized he was digging his own grave. The Sterling case? Jessica choked out, her voice barely a whisper. What does that have to do with this? Michael was just revisiting it, trying to finally get justice for those families, for those lives Sterling ruined. No. David's voice rose, laced with a frantic, desperate edge. He found the new ledgers. The ones I kept hidden. The ones proving Sterling was still laundering money, using shell corporations, and that I was still on his payroll, providing intel, making sure his operation stayed under the radar. He was going to expose me, Jess. He was going to expose us. David's eyes, wide and bloodshot, pleaded with his sister for understanding, for forgiveness. Michael felt a profound, sickening lurch in his spectral stomach. Us? The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. David finally crawled towards Michael's body, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He didn't touch him, just knelt there, his gaze fixed on the vacant eyes of his former partner. He had proof, Jess. Proof that I helped Sterling cover up the environmental violations years ago. Proof that I've been taking dirty money ever since, just little bits, just enough to get by. He knew I funneled some of it into your medical treatments, into your small business. He knew I was trying to give you a better life, trying to make up for my mistakes, but it was all tainted. All of it. His voice broke, thick with self-loathing. He was going to bring it all down, Jess. All of it. Our whole life built on a lie. He was going to ruin everything. Ruin you. Jessica stared, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. Her hand flew to her mouth again, not to stifle a scream, but to suppress a gasp of pure horror. My treatments? My business? David, no. Yes, he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. He was going to expose the whole network. Sterling would have come after you, Jess, to silence me, to silence us both. He would have left us with nothing. I had no choice. I thought if I just stopped him, then it would all go away. He was too close, Jess. Too close. He looked up at Jessica, his face a mask of raw anguish, begging her to understand the impossible position he believed he was in. Michael understood now. The fragmented memories of David's death, Jessica's illness, the hints of desperation. They weren't just background noise, random clues. They were the very fabric of his betrayal. David, his partner, his friend, had been slowly corrupted, driven by a desperate desire to protect his sister, to buy her a future, even if it meant sacrificing his own integrity. He had built a life for her on a foundation of lies, and Michael, in his relentless, unwavering pursuit of truth, had unknowingly become the final obstacle, threatening to collapse it all. It wasn't malice, but a tragic, misguided loyalty that had led to this. Jessica slowly reached into her pocket. David flinched, expecting a phone, but she pulled out a small, almost imperceptible silver locket. It was tarnished, worn smooth from years of touch. This was Mom's, she whispered, her voice trembling, but now infused with a new steel-like resolve. She gave it to me right before she died. She said it was a reminder to always choose what's right, no matter how hard, no matter the cost. She looked at David, her eyes filled with a grief far deeper than Michael's death alone. A grief for the brother she thought she knew, for the choices he had made, for the life he had destroyed. You didn't have to do this, David. There was always another way. We could have faced it together. I would have helped you. We could have gone to the police, tried to expose Sterling, found a way to make things right. But you chose this. Then, with a resolve that hardened her features, banishing fear, she raised her phone. Her thumb moved with purpose. I'm calling it in, David. Everything. You, Sterling, everything. There has to be justice. For Michael. For those families. For all of us. David lunged, a desperate, animalistic cry escaping his lips. A final desperate attempt to cling to his crumbling world. No. Jess, please. They'll kill you. Sterling will send his men. You don't know what you're doing." But Jessica was faster. Her fingers flew across the screen, dialing. "911, what's your emergency?" She spoke into the phone, her voice shaking but firm, a beacon of unwavering truth in the desolate warehouse. "My name is Jessica Miller. I'm at the old Sterling warehouse on Elm Street. There's been a shooting. My brother David Miller just shot Detective Michael Davies, and he's confessing to everything. He's confessing about Richard Sterling, about his corruption, about everything." Michael watched as David collapsed, utterly broken, beside his own lifeless form, his pleas devolving into guttural sobs. He saw the flicker of police lights in the distance, heard the faint, growing wail of sirens. Justice. It was coming. Not just for him, but for all the lives Sterling had ruined, and for David's own tortured soul, finally unburdened by the weight of his terrible secrets. A gentle warmth began to spread through Michael. The cold, ethereal tether that had bound him to this world, to this desperate search, began to loosen. The warehouse, David, Jessica, his own body. They all started to shimmer, to recede like a fading memory, like the last wisps of a dream upon waking. He felt a profound sense of peace. The answers he had sought, the truth he had chased beyond the veil of death, were now revealed. His work was done. His final case was closed. His story, the one he couldn't tell in life, would now be told, ensured by Jessica's courage. He saw a light, not blinding but inviting. A familiar warmth, a sense of belonging. He recognized it. It was the feeling of a cold case finally closed, the last piece of the puzzle falling into place. The quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The ultimate release from the earthly chains of unfinished business. He looked back one last time, seeing Jessica, strong and resolute, guiding the first responders, ensuring the truth would not be buried, that his sacrifice would not be in vain. He saw the broken figure of David, his friend, now facing the inevitable consequences of his tragic choices, his desperate attempt to protect his sister having led to ultimate ruin. And he saw his own body, no longer a mystery, but a testament to a life lived in relentless pursuit of justice, even in death. And then Michael Davies, the detective who investigated his own murder, stepped into the light, leaving behind only the echoes of a truth finally revealed, and the quiet, enduring whisper that some mysteries, even death itself, cannot conceal.